What are executive functions and how is executive function disorder different from ADHD? Executive functions very loosely could be described as the various abilities to control your thinking and therefore your actions. They're a group of cognitive controls that allow you to manage your life. They're often associated with the prefrontal cortex, though other parts of the brain are important as well. And they're among the last traits to come online in human cognitive development. There isn't one definitive list of executive functions, but most lists include impulse control, which is the ability to pause, to look before leaping, to think before speaking or acting. Inhibition or interference control, which is the ability to block distracting external noise or internal thoughts. Working memory, which is the ability to hold thoughts and details in mind while engaged and recall them at the right time. And cognitive flexibility, or the ability to think creatively outside the box, to think from a different perspective or adapt to changing circumstances. Other executive functions include planning, organization, self-monitoring, time management, attention stability, etc. Most lists include 10 to 15 traits or so. They are the late to develop, high-level cognitive abilities for managing your life effectively. Executive function disorder, or just executive dysfunction, is when one or several of these traits are very significantly impaired or falls well below statistical norms for a person of that age. Now, you may notice that if you know much about ADHD, we're talking about a lot of the same traits, but executive dysfunction is not a diagnosed condition, i.e. it's not officially recognized in the DSM-5, which is the official doctor book of the American Psychological Association, whereas ADHD is. ADHD confirms that a person checks enough specific boxes to qualify for the diagnosis. It's 5 out of 9 boxes for kids. It's 6 out of 9 boxes for adults. Furthermore, ADHD breaks into a few different flavors. Well, 2 flavors plus combined. There's hyperactive ADHD. These are the people we most often associate with the condition. They're always moving and fidgeting. They have little ability to control their movement, are often described as, quote, being driven by a motor. They struggle with impulse control, lack of inhibition, self-monitoring, attention stability, as well as time blindness. Then there's the inattentive subtype of ADHD. Some doctors and experts still refer to these folks as just ADD, though technically that term has been absorbed into ADHD in the DSM-5. These folks are pretty different than the hyperactive subset. They don't have the hyperactive component at all. They're often seen as spacey or in their own worlds. They also struggle with self-monitoring, attention stability, working memory, time blindness, and are often very disorganized. Both subtypes can and do often struggle with many of the other executive functions. The combined subtypes are simply the double winners. They check enough boxes for both diagnoses. Okay, so what's the difference between executive dysfunction and ADHD if we're talking about lots of the same sorts of impairments? Well, often not much. Put simply, people with ADHD have executive dysfunction, but not everyone with executive dysfunction is ADHD. ADHD is about significant impairments of specific executive functions, and they're impaired enough that they often need medication and therapies, as well as school and sometimes even work accommodations. Executive dysfunction, on the other hand, may involve one or several of the same executive dysfunctions, but they either don't rise to the level of an ADHD diagnosis or they don't check enough of the specific ADHD boxes. In real life, there's often little distinction in the kind of disruption each experiences, and the skills and tools for shoring up the specific deficits are often the same. The truth is, both conditions can be very individual in terms of the constellation of specific executive functions and symptoms, with tons of overlap regardless of the official diagnosis. It's important to establish an ADHD diagnosis if you're intent on pursuing meds and therapies with the hopes of having insurance cover them. But in the end, both conditions will need some degree of physiological intervention be it meds or neurofeedback or physical exercise, mindfulness training, etc., as well as many of the same sorts of learned behavioral skills and tools. I hope this has been helpful. If you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to reach out to us.